Good afternoon and welcome to Today on Bay TV. We are live in Swansea on Monday the 22nd of May 2017. I'm Henry Darby-Cook and this is Gaynor Morgan, and today we are joined by Byron Davies, a Conservative candidate for Gower, and Spencer Feeney has also joined us.
And before we take a look at what's happened on this day in history, let's hear from Theresa May, who's just launched the Conservative manifesto for Wales in North Wales.
Every vote for me and my team in this election will be a vote to strengthen my hand in the negotiations to come. Every vote for any other party, Labour, the Liberal Democrats, Plaid Cymru, is a vote to send Jeremy Corbyn into the negotiating chamber on our behalf. And that is the stark reality of the choice that we face, the choice we must focus on over the next 17 days. Because our future prosperity depends on getting the next 5 years right. That is why we need someone representing Britain who is 100% committed to the cause. Not someone who's uncertain or unsure, but someone utterly determined to deliver the democratic will of the British people. Because if we don't get this right, the consequences for the United Kingdom and for the economic security of ordinary working people will be dire.
There was also a bit of controversy outside where they were today in Wrexham. There was someone protesting Fox Hunting. I think we've got a little clip of that as well.
Get your hands off me! This is the fascist state that we're living in! This is the fascist state that we're living in! This is the fascist state we're living in!
Stop! Hey, there's no need. There's no need. Unhand him, please.
This is the fascist state that we're living in!
Well, he didn't get too close to the Prime Minister, did he? Byron, presidential or what? Do you think? She was quite presidential in that address.
I think she's quite realistic about it, actually. I mean, the thought of some of the opposition parties, particularly that led by Jeremy Corbyn, is just horrendous. I mean, you've got to remember, I've sat for 2 years on the back benches looking across the chamber and seeing the various groups that are formed within the Labour Party who are totally against their leader. And the whole thing is in total disarray. And the Prime Minister is absolutely right, we need strong leadership to go forward. This is the most important time in recent history of the United Kingdom, and we really do need a strong leadership, and she needs the country behind her, therefore she needs Parliament behind her.
I think we'll probably have a chance to expand on that a bit later, but for now I think we're going back in history, are we, Henry?
We are. We'll have a little look at what happened on this day. We're going to start in 1859, the birth of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, obviously the novelist who created the detective Sherlock Holmes. Are we all fans of Sherlock Holmes and the tales?
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
And of course the new version of the TV series.
Exactly, with Benedict Cumberbatch. It's very good, isn't it? Interested to know, though, that Arthur Conan Doyle actually hated Sherlock Holmes. He disliked his detective stories that overshadowed his other work. However, he tried to kill off the character, and he was actually met with threats. So, because the
He had to bring him back, didn't he?
He did.
He killed him off when he went over the falls with Moriarty, but had to bring him back because there was such a public demand.
A bit like Dallas, was it all a dream?
But yeah, and obviously the beauty of this is it's been recreated and reimagined so many times. Obviously we had, there's been the film with Robert Downey Jr. and obviously, yeah, that was really good. We had 2 of those.
Such well-crafted stories, aren't they?
Well, he's an iconic character, isn't he? You know, it's gone way beyond the original creation now and beyond the original stories. As you said, he can be reinvented for generation after generation.
And I think the latest version with Benedict Cumberbatch that the BBC are doing, I think is one of the best TV series in a long time, I think.
It's been a worldwide hit, hasn't it? They've been able to sell that series all over the world.
So Arthur Conan Doyle, actually a very interesting man I was reading this morning. He had an unlikely friendship with Houdini.
Yes, it's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose it makes sense in a way.
Because of his interest in spiritualism, wasn't it? He was a spiritualist. You know, I think, like many people after the First World War, the devastation that caused and the loss of so many young lives, I think spiritualism had an upsurge in popularity. You know, desperate people hoping to get in touch with their loss, and Conan Doyle was very, very heavily involved in that movement.
And obviously the other one that people remember him for as well is obviously he believed in fairies and those famous images where the little girls had the fairies and he was involved in the
Links
stories.
together, doesn't it? Links together that you believe there are other worlds.
Yeah.
You know.
Moving on, 1907, Laurence Olivier, the English actor, was born. I mean, obviously...
Yeah, far more than an English actor, isn't he?
Yeah.
Again, if you're talking about iconic figures, I mean,
Just doesn't do him
one
justice, does
of
it?
the great figures of the British stage and screen. You know, he made some of the best Shakespearean films, you know, particularly Henry V, made in 1944 as a propaganda movie, you know, and probably the greatest Shakespearean film in my view.
Is there a modern day version of Laurence Olivier? Do you think there's anyone that comes
Kenneth
close?
Branagh followed in his line and was very much regarded as the heir to Olivier. I think Shakespeare may be becoming more democratic. Strangely enough, he's becoming ever more popular all around the world, and I think more and more people feel he's accessible, and more actors are willing to attempt Shakespearean roles.
Is that the way they're played, perhaps?
Well, yeah, every generation plays theatre differently, doesn't it? You know, if you look at some of the Olivier roles on film, you'd probably think they're very mannered now. But when Olivier came in, he was seen as a breath of fresh air following on from Sir John Gielgud. Same with Branagh, took it on. Michael Sheen has played some very interesting roles. Each generation, I think, reinterprets. And again, as you said with Sherlock Holmes could be reinterpreted, well, Shakespeare obviously is Sherlock Holmes multiplied by 1,000,000, you know, and
Just a bit.
And the Shakespeare can be and is reinterpreted for every generation and every country. Again, Shakespeare is performed all over the world.
Timeless genius.
Moving on, 1959, Morrissey was born, so it's his birthday today. Obviously, he's the lead singer of what was the Smiths. Very famous for being interested in politics. We've got a great clip, actually, from 2004 where he spoke on his birthday about politics. Should we have a little look at that?
I think your birthday is also tomorrow.
Yes.
Now, that's a nice thing. What do you want for your birthday?
Well, what would any 30-year-old want?
Yeah, no, what do you want for your birthday?
I've just answered that question. I'd like George W. to, and I'd like Tony Blair to, and I'd be happy.
And who would you like to come in? Yeah.
It's on the cards, surely.
Would you like a career in politics, do you think?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
It's unavoidable, really.
Yeah, I think I could see you as a... You look like you could be a politician to me.
I've never been so insulted, but but I'll pick up the pieces and I'll carry.
What a character. And he started out as a journalist, didn't he? Music journalist.
Well, it begs the question, why hasn't he gone into politics then? It could be that it has that awkwardness about having to get elected, having to get people to actually vote for you.
Putting your head above the parapet.
Well, I think, was it last year or the year before, there was talk of him possibly looking at to be the mayor of London, which I think would have been quite interesting, but then he realised he couldn't live in LA and be the mayor of London.
Could be a handicap, yeah.
Obviously, he's done a huge amount for men's mental health and being open about his depression and helping people kind of talk about it and be more open about it. Still suffers with it very much today, and even when he was, you know, in his youth in the Smiths, he was very open about it in his songs. Are you a fan, Byron, of Morrissey and his music?
Not particularly, I have to say, only because it's probably one of my weak areas, to be quite frank with you. But I have heard his music, and it's good. I've got nothing against Morrissey's music, but I'm not I wouldn't say I'm a fan of it, no.
Spencer? No?
No, not especially, no. I'm more of a Springsteen man myself.
I'm certainly a fan of his speaking out about mental health issues. I think it's so important, and particularly for men, there's this big macho thing, isn't there? And as a result, so many people suffer. And so many creative people have this sort of issue, don't they? You know, it's a sort of dark side of life sometimes. So
I think so many people in all walks of life suffer from mental illness, and it doesn't get discussed enough, and it's not open enough. It's a bit of a cliche to say it particularly affects creative people. I think it affects all walks of life.
yes, but it is emerging as more of an issue, more of a part of life now.
Yeah, and celebrities can play an important role in that. You know, sometimes people say celebrities should just keep quiet and just do what they do. No, why shouldn't they? Why shouldn't everybody in society have the opportunity to say what they think?
Finally, one last fact about him. 2006, the BBC held a poll and he was voted the second greatest living British icon. So,
Go then?
Well,
behind?
I'm not sure.
I believe it was Winston Churchill.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Oh no, well, living icon couldn't be Winston
Stop
Churchill. I don't know. I don't know. Who the
Just before we go to the break, obviously there's other candidates in the gala, and you can see them now on your screens.
And next we'll be looking at today's papers with Byron and Spencer. So I dare say politics will feature in that, and possibly the Swans. Look forward to that.
for decades.
Why is it horrendous?
Well, because it's about our future, it's about our economy, it's about how we trade with foreign countries, and it's about our relationship with Europe. Horrendous in the sense that there's a lot to be considered.
Not horrendous in the sense of what are we facing?
Oh, no, not at all. No. Horrendous in the sense that the government. Horrendous in the sense that the government has an awful lot to take into consideration, and I would strongly suggest to you that certainly the Labour Party is in no fit state to do that.
I'm sure we'll hear more of that in part 3.
We will.
Moving on to The Guardian then, we'll go to their front page, and they've actually gone with Facebook. It's been revealed kind of in the early hours of this morning. Facebook's secret rules of sex, violence and hate speech and terror. Facebook and other social media platforms have actually come under a huge amount of scrutiny with the run-up to the general election for fake news and what they decide to take down and what they don't decide to take down. Do you think, Byron, there should be more focus on Facebook and Twitter for how they police content and how things are dealt with properly?
I do, absolutely. As you may not know, I've been a member of the Home Affairs Select Committee, and we did an inquiry which published this report just prior to Parliament being dissolved. And the recommendations in there were quite clear that they must take more responsibility for what occurs on their pages or their social media sites. In particular, they sit back and allow the police service to have to investigate these issues and pay nothing towards that. And so we as taxpayers have to, carry that cost. And I think that's quite wrong.
Spencer, a lot of the focus has moved to social media now, hasn't it? A lot of people consume their news from social media, but they don't face the same constraints as we do.
And I was having a discussion with some former journalists and some ex-colleagues on Facebook, as it happens, over the weekend, and I was making the point that the age of mainstream media as the mass opinion formers is over. And the age of social media opinion formers has begun.
But it's kind of stuck up.
And, well, has it? I don't know. I think perhaps mainstream media might have been slow to see it, and some politicians, I think, have been slow to see it. Some politicians, it seems to me, are still obsessed with who owns what newspaper.
In that there are no constraints, or very few constraints, or not the same constraints.
Facebook and Twitter have been desperate to avoid being branded as publishers. Mm-hmm. Once they're seen as publishers, it changes the game. They say we're just platforms. They're not. The reality, they are publishers. Mm-hmm. And what also was interesting in that Guardian story today, it was saying that the moderators at Facebook are simply overwhelmed.
They are. There's, I think, 18,500 Facebook employees worldwide, and they can't administrate the page.
But there's probably more people than that joining Facebook every hour. Mm-hmm. And they just simply cannot. They're trapped by their own success in that way.
It's difficult when you're consuming news in the middle of the night on Facebook to know actually what's what and what.
Well, there's 300 million uploads a day with over 2 billion users.
You are then into the realms of fake news, aren't you? And it's a glib phrase, but actually there's a very, very serious point behind it. There's a lot of dangerous stuff out there, and who's got the internal filters to decide?
Up to the politics.
Well, I think it's also up to the companies like Facebook.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. It is up to the companies to take responsibility for this one. You can say it's up to the politicians, perhaps to legislate, but it is up to the companies to actually take ownership and deal with it. Which is what they're not doing at the moment.
They have the money, Gaynor. They have the profits. They have the money to spend on
I think Twitter had something like £100 million profit last year.
Mm. It's a conversation that will go on, I'm sure. Anyway, just before we have a break, we have other candidates in Gower. You can see them on the screens now, and we'll be back soon.
Welcome back to Today on Bay TV. I'm Henry Darby-Cook and this is Gaynor Morgan. We're still with Byron Davies, a Conservative candidate for Gower, and Spencer Feeney has stayed with us as well.
Before we get stuck into politics, let's go back to North Wales and hear from Theresa May once more.
Just announced a significant change to what was offered in your manifesto, saying there will now be the possibility of a cap on social care that was not in the plans that was announced just 4 days ago. That doesn't look so strong and stable, Prime Minister, does it? It looks rather like panic in the face of opposition. And can you tell us today where the cap on social care costs will be set to set families' minds at rest?
Well, first of all, what we are doing and what we set out in our manifesto is a long-term plan for actually securing a sustainable future for social care in this country. So I said, if you just look at the figures of the numbers, even the number of over 75-year-olds, that will be 2 million more within the next decade, our social care system will collapse unless we address this problem. And we can't leave it to the future. We have to start dealing with it now. That's why I want to fix it, and I'm going to fix it. And the plans that we set out were very clear in the manifesto. You can look in the manifesto, Laura. I think it was page 64 or 65. We said we'd issue a green paper. And of course, within that green paper, we'll be consulting on the details of the proposals and the principles that we have set out.
Byron Davies, some people are referring to it as a bit of a U-turn on the dementia tax, as it's being called.
I think that's a favourite media phrase, isn't it? There's no U-turn on it. I mean, you heard from the Prime Minister there. It's always been open to consultation. And that's the whole point of a green paper. That's the whole point of announcing these things in a manifesto. And as the Prime Minister rightly says, you know, there are over 2 million people in the next decade that are going to be over the age of 75 years of age. You've got to be real about this and you've got to deal with it. It's no good brushing it under the carpet. And if you're going to blame this, this party, the Conservative Party, for being realistic about it, well, I mean, it's a sad state of affairs. We've really got to deal with it and be upfront.
Is it the equivalent of Margaret Thatcher's poll tax?
Well, that's a matter for you to consider. I don't think it is.
What do you think, Spencer?
I don't think it's a U-turn, but it's a swerve. No matter how much Penny put on it, there was no mention of a cap in the manifesto. They are talking about a cap now. The polls did significantly shorten over the weekend. Labour picked up
it's a big
strongly.
wobble.
Creating a situation where somebody can come up with a term like dementia tax and see that on the front page of a Tory paper like the Mail on Sunday yesterday suggests that it was an error, and I think they are trying to rectify that. And I suspect what will happen now is that Theresa May will work very hard to get the conversation back onto Brexit, which is the area where she obviously feels that she can score most
safe there,
heavily.
doesn't she? Strong and stable.
And I guess we'll see also an increase in this sort of almost personalised attacks on Jeremy Corbyn and whether or not he would be fit and able to lead the country into those Brexit negotiations.
That was pretty stark in the speech in North Wales this morning, Byron, where basically Theresa May said, do you really want Jeremy Corbyn to go into the Brexit negotiations? Because that's what will happen if Labour wins the election. That's quite personal.
Of course it's personal. It's about the possibility of having Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister. We
don't have a presidential system in this country, though, do we?
Well, we don't have a presidential system, but let's be honest. When we vote for a particular party, we know that who that party's leader is. We are still effectively, in our parliamentary democracy system, voting for somebody to become Prime Minister. So while we don't have a presidential system, it would be, I think, unrealistic to say that you or I will vote with our minds completely free of the consequences in terms of who walks into number 10.
It has been suggested over the weekend and today that Theresa May didn't consult fully on this issue of the dementia tax.
Well, first of all, let me say, I think it's a very crude term, dementia tax, which
well,
has been
another one is a death tax.
I just do think it is. It's not a dementia tax at all.
It has frightened people, though.
Yes, and that's very sad, isn't it? That it's frightened people because it's called a dementia tax. I think that's very crude and very unnecessary.
I think it's a stark fact that has frightened people, whatever the label.
No, well then I'm trying to, the Prime Minister has explained, and I've just tried to explain to you that this is for consultation, okay? It's something that the Green Paper will be published and there will be lots of debate around it. And it may well alter course. That's the whole point. That's the democracy we live in. That's how we deal with things. And that's what will happen.
I think the consultation might have been better, Byron, if it was done before it went into the manifesto, though. It's asking quite a lot of people. And I fully agree with you that social care is a growing problem or issue that has to be dealt with. It's going to be really expensive, and we can't escape from the fact that we've got to pay for it. Somehow it's got to be paid for.
You have to make the announcement before you have the consultation. You have to say, this is what we're going to discuss. You can't have a discussion and say, well, this is what we're going to... You know, it just doesn't work that way around.
Has anyone looked at why it costs so much in the first place?
Sorry?
Has anyone looked at why it all costs so much in the first place?
Well, because we're getting older. The generations...
The actual cost
we
of
live
caring
in
for people.
Absolutely. We are getting older as a generation now.
The actual cost is...
But I don't think you can have care on the cheap, Grainer. You know, I mean, my point is, if you get cancer, you don't have to pay. You get treated by the NHS, which of course you have paid for through taxation. If you get dementia, you do have to make a personal contribution that comes out of your savings. My view is that we should treat dementia exactly the same as cancer and other physical illnesses, and you shouldn't have to make a direct personal payment, because I believe care should be paid for, as the NHS is, through direct taxation. So it's not,
Byron, why is one illness different
not
from
free,
another?
not
It may
free.
be something that's discussed in the consultation, and there's a good reason for having a consultation.
But of course, very difficult to get the public to accept an increase in income tax, which is what I'm saying you'd have to do to pay for a national care service.
One of the other big issues is getting young people to vote. I think today, Henry, is the last day for
It is
registering.
12 o'clock tonight. There's been 2 million new voters registered since the general election was called, which is great news, but obviously there's still more people that haven't registered yet.
7 million who still haven't registered, and I can't understand why people don't register. I don't know why people don't vote. My view is simple: if you don't vote, don't whinge.
Byron, is there anything you can think of why there's been such an issue in the past with young people, with that 18 to 24-year-olds not going to the polls?
I really don't know. It's something that I've toiled with for some time, actually, and I'm very keen that young people vote. I guess when I look back at myself, you know, I was quite keen to vote, actually, as indeed were my contemporaries. I really don't understand why people don't want to engage in it. Perhaps we're not appealing from a parliamentary, you know, Westminster point of view to young people, and they don't want to engage. If that is the case, then we really need to do something about it. I mean, we've just had local council elections, as you know, and we've in my party we've managed to get some young people elected, new young people elected, and the whole purpose of it was to engage with young people. So I'm very much for it, and I sincerely hope that these new people that have the 2 million are young, of a younger generation.
Here's a way to get young people to vote. Allow them to vote on Facebook or on Twitter or on social media. Move away from the idea of having to go to a polling station.
How do you control that? But
I don't know,
the point...
but it sounds flippant, but there's a serious point there. And
there is a serious point, actually. Yeah.
Maybe the system is seen as so old-fashioned.
Yeah.
And of course, Jeremy Corbyn has addressed the issue of tuition fees, certainly in England, was it yesterday or today? I mean, that's a big issue among young people, obviously.
Yeah, of course it is, yeah. I mean, education is evolved here in Wales. But, yeah, it is a big issue amongst young people, and rightly so.
What are the issues facing you in Gower, as you see it?
The biggest issue in Gower that comes up on every doorstep, and certainly that I've had most mail about, is the local development plan. The issue of infrastructure, the fact that we don't have the surgeries that can deal with the new sort of increase in population, the fact that we don't have roads that can deal with it, the fact that the M4 junction 47, for example, at Pentlagar is overloaded in the morning. Those are the issues that come up continually.
Spencer, is that the way you see it?
Well,
local issues?
Well, how strongly do local issues play in general elections? I've always taken the view that it's more national issues, but I take your point on transport, and I think the much heralded city deal that has been talked about, I think there's a gap in the city deal. That there's not anything in there that talks about a very modern, integrated transport system for this region.
I'm with you 100% on that. And one of the things that I started talking to Chris Grayling about, actually, was exactly that, an infrastructure, transport infrastructure, which we do not have in South West Wales. It's all well and good talking about Swansea in isolation, but we have to look at the bigger picture.
Very quickly, Byron, not much mention of the lagoon in the Tory manifesto.
No, because it's being discussed. It's with the Secretary of State at the moment. And the matter is, it's in a delicate stage of discussions for the strike price between government and between Swansea Tidal Lagoon. So, you know, people can criticise it all day long, but government is taking a very strong sort of line on it, getting the right price. This could be for 60, 90 or 120 years down the line that we will have to pay for this. So we've got to get it right.
Address that again, I'm sure. Thank you both very much indeed. We're going to have a break now. There are other candidates on gala. You can see them now. Head into a break.
After the break, we're going to be talking films with Keith and Spencer. Welcome back to your final part of Today on Bay TV. I'm Henry Darby-Cook, and this is Gaynor Morgan.
I think we've had enough politics for one day, haven't we? Keith's come in to lighten the mood, haven't you, Keith Milward? You're going to talk. You're going to talk films. Spencer's still with us, and I think Alien Covenant.
I went to see Alien Covenant. Before we lighten the mood, let me tell you about Alien Covenant. The crew of the colony spaceship Covenant is bound for a remote planet, but divert to what seems to be an uncharted paradise. However, there is a terrible danger lurking there. Shall we have a look at a clip?
Let's have a little look.
Okay, Walter, where is it?
It's on B deck. Starboard side. Descending into sea level. K-13.
COC-61. Open airlock 17. We're going in.
K-12. Secure.
Oh, that's very pleasant, isn't it?
Okay, well...
should we say the timeline first?
I'll be upfront. I was disappointed with this. This is the latest in what is now a growing Alien franchise. We had Alien, we had Aliens, we had Alien 3, Alien Resurrection, and then 2012 we had Prometheus, and now we have Alien Covenant, which is set after Prometheus, but before Alien. So there's quite a complex timeline. Also, because there have been so many of these films, I think there's a lot in this film that people will be familiar with, not just from the previous Alien films, but from other films recently like Passengers and Life, which came out a couple of months ago. So there's a lot there that's familiar, and it seemed to me that Ridley Scott, the director, to compensate for this familiarity, has gone much heavier on the gore. It's much gorier, this film. When the alien monster, which we now have to call a xenomorph apparently, when it attacks, it's much more graphic. You see a lot more blood and guts and splatter.
You know what xenomorph means? It's something that eats everything. What?
It's what they've decided to call it. There are little monsters called neomorphs, and there's the big monster called a xenomorph. And I don't think we should.
I don't know why I asked.
I don't think we should probe too deeply into why. Also, different from the other Alien films, there's a lot more outdoor scenes in this. Now, one of Ridley Scott's great strengths as a director is the way he handles metropolitan scenes. You think of Black Hawk Down, Mogadishu, Gladiator with ancient Rome. He's very good at that, and those scenes are really, really good. But of course, it's at the cost of the kind of terrifying claustrophobia that you're used to from the Alien films, the idea of everybody trapped in this spacecraft with this ravaging monster tearing about the place. So you lose that kind of classic Alien claustrophobia, and I don't believe that you get back enough in compensation to make up for that.
So much for lightening the mood.
Well, it doesn't. I mean,
are you going to rate it? Give it a
star?
Well,
yeah, I'll rate it. I'll be very harsh. I'll rate it 2 stars because I think there's a tedious reprisal of over-familiar scenarios in this. And the bad news is Ridley Scott's planning another 2 prequels to Alien following on from this. Heaven help us.
I think Keith Milward's had a much merrier weekend, haven't you?
Yes, well, you wouldn't get me there anyway. It was enough when I went on the Universal ride, Alien, you know, I was frightened to death.
I have come to the conclusion that there are very few films here that I can persuade people to go and see. Henry's You and Me in the stores, I think.
Well, I've still got a few on my bucket list. I mean, there's The Voice Ride, a few.
No, but you're right, because I've been to London the weekend and I've seen some wonderful Broadway shows, but put on in small venues. And I want to say about one venue in particular, which is at the Waterloo East Theatre in London, and that's run by a chap from Gowerton. It's and currently the Waterloo East Theatre has the Broadway musical Ballroom there with Jessica Martin that some of us will remember from Copycats, etc. on the television. It's an absolutely splendid show, you know. So if anyone's in the London area, please go along to the Waterloo East Theatre to support them.
It's very brave to put on a big show like that in a small theatre. I mean, the cost must be astronomical.
Well, yes. Gerald Armin really stuck his neck out there to put this show on, but it's something special that it's put on in a small space, and sometimes these big shows with good stories actually they work better in a small space. You know, the story comes over
feel more
even
part of
more.
it.
Yes, it was lovely anyway. Yes, but of course I'm here to talk films and Talking Pictures films this week. This afternoon is I'm All Right Jack, starring Ian Carmichael and Peter Sellers, Richard Attenborough as well. And it's about an upper-class chap who's come out of the army and he's gone to work in industry, but he inadvertently, well, there's a strike.
Shall we take a look?
Yes.
Another good one to start on. Collective childhood and factory manhood.
Oh, sounds fun.
Yeah, very descriptive. It's all about how they run factories in a workers' state. However, I won't spoil it for you.
You ever been to Russia, Mr. Kite?
No, not yet. It's the one place I'd like to go to, though. All them cornfields and valley in the evening.
Oh, I wish I knew as much about it as you do.
You ever read any of Lenin's works, have you?
No, I'm afraid I haven't.
That'll open your eyes for you.
Is he still on about Russia? I'll tell you straight. That's all we ever get to hear in this house.
Irene Handel as well, yes, and two great actors there as well with Peter Sellers, Ian Carmichael.
Peter Sellers never been better on film than in that film, I think.
Well, yes, and they're both remembered well for that film. And Ian Carmichael, of course, for Bertie Wooster.
Yeah, Ian Carmichael getting into character.
Yes, yes. Now, the temperature's gone up, hasn't it, around here, which is lovely. We all appreciate it. But tonight's film at 10 o'clock, it's Night of the Big Heat, starring Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. And the temperature goes to boiling point, and the atmosphere is taken to boiling point, and trying to find out the cause of this heat wave. So I think there's a clip of
There is. Let's have a little look.
Can I help you?
Is Mr. Callum in?
No, I'm afraid not. He's on his way back from the mainland. I'm Mrs. Callum.
I'm Angela Roberts, his new secretary.
Oh, yes. My husband said that the agency was sending someone this week. I've got a room ready for you. I'll show you the way.
Actually, I'd rather like a drink first. I'm gasping. This heat is stifling.
Yes, of course.
May I have the pleasure? My name's Stone, Dr. Stone.
Thank you, Doctor. I'll have a lager and lime, please.
So you shall.
Is this your first visit to the island, Miss Roberts?
Yes, it's very pretty. I had a drive round after I got off the boat. Oh, it is hot, isn't it?
This time of year, we usually have the same weather as you on the mainland.
I'm sorry about the ice, but it melts as soon as it's out of the fridge.
Things are starting to heat up.
You need that drink. What year was that?
That's 1967. But I do like Peter Cushing's acting, and Christopher Lee as well. You know, he's there. And we remember the Dracula films and the Sherlock Holmes films with both of those. And we remember the Whitehall farces, some of us, don't we? The Brian Rix farces. Well, there's a film tomorrow afternoon, Dry Rot, which is about the bookies, and they rig a horse race because they've been losing out and they've been losing money. So in for lots of fun. Yes.
Just give us a taste of that.
Yes, please.
Rot. This nag's a dead spit of the French horse, Cardinal.
So what?
Well, we kidnap Cardinal, put this one in its place, it's bound to lose.
What's the good of that?
We back Cardinal to lose.
Why?
Je voudrais quelque chose à boire.
There's Polignac, a very polished rider, leading jump jockey in France. And he's done very well on Cardinal this season.
Well, yes, and Brian Rix and Peggy Mount's there, and so Sid James, you know, so that's going to lighten our mood, isn't it? Great. And something my choice for this week, and it's on Sunday, 12 noon, it's the bank holiday as well, and it's Moby Dick. So it's Herman Melville's Moby Dick, but starring Gregory Peck. You know, this is the one going back to 1956, you know, so that's one for all the family, I think, isn't it? You know, in the search for the great whale.
It's a great white whale.
Yes, yes, you know, so that's great. But there's drama on Wednesday, there's Summertime at 2 o'clock. That stars Catherine Hepburn.
Plenty to look forward to.
Thank you both.
Loads and loads.
And thank you to all our other guests today and to all our viewers for watching us, especially those who've tuned in for our Talking Pictures afternoon matinee coming up next on Bay. Keith just told you what it is.
Today is a 1959 comedy, I'm All Right, Jack.